You're looking for the hand cue, aren't you?
Yeah.
Jake just asked if he's a little late. We don't have our normal producer here. It's been a couple hard episodes, so at least I'm not doing myself. So welcome everyone. Welcome Jake.
Thank you.
Welcome everyone that's listening and will be listening. Welcome to episode 62. Tonight I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, former U.S. or Ohio Air National Guard.
Oh my gosh.
Staff Sergeant Jake Day. So it's a privilege to have you here.
Thanks.
On the show. Took you a while to convince you. Thank you for
yeah, you annoyed me long enough. I just finally said, let's get it over with.
Yeah, you definitely got even, by the way. I mean, Jake is literally I was a couple days late in asking for the information, but I mean, he took it to the deadline. I had to search it, find pictures from you. I mean, people will call it stalking, but I did stalk him last night to make sure we had some pictures going. So excited about that. Thanks for keeping me on my toes. So I'm going to start off with, as we always do, I'll start off with the quote. This quote hopefully means more to you than it will to everybody else that's listening. But so this is from Sanea Roman. It says, your guide is aligned with your higher purpose, and your work together will always enhance your life purpose in some way.
I like that.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think it's the first one I didn't start off with any type of military quote.
Yeah, who is that?
It's Sanea Roman.
Who is that?
Roman. I don't know. I got to look at it. I mean, if you'd have given me more time to prep some other stuff, I might have been able to do a little more research on Sanea, maybe get the right pronunciation.
Yeah, now I'm curious.
I thought that was a good quote, though.
Yeah, it is.
So why that's important for us, I guess we could say, like Jake came back for me. We'll talk about that more. And Jake and I meet every Sunday, so this is kind of a conversation that we have. Hopefully, maybe not. That we have every Sunday be similar, maybe in some aspects.
Absolutely.
We talk about like, and Jake has been my guide for about a year now.
Humble guide.
Sometimes.
When my head can fit in the coffee shop.
Exactly. When everybody's not walking by asking for your autograph. But do you remember the first time we sat and talked when we were at the Starbucks?
Oh, you were the BFD then, that man. Like everybody knew you. It's like we'll have to drive 10 miles outside of town so we can actually have a conversation.
That was the most awkward thing, wasn't it? I ran into one person in the coffee shop, and then we're sitting there starting a conversation, and then someone's banging on the window. I kind of forgot about that. Now it's just Jake. Everybody stops and asks him for his autograph.
Yeah.
It's no big deal. So, but thanks for coming out, Jake. I appreciate that. I thought it was a good quote. We got some other good quotes later on, but another Ohio kid. Grew up in the area, Reynoldsburg. Yes,
indeed. Central Ohio, Buckeye through and through.
So good. And I didn't realize how young you were until today.
Thanks, Jay.
Because you're always calling me old and everything. I am old, goddamn. So, born in 1981. So, share with the audience. Talk about growing up a little bit. Your brothers or sisters?
So, I had a younger sister. She's 4.5 years younger than me. And so it's kind of, we weren't in high school together. So it's kind of different, like I see my kids now and they're only a year and a half apart. So they, grew up playing together a lot. So it's like just separated enough, but yeah, pretty standard suburban upbringing in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. Yeah.
So what were kids doing in the late 90s in Reynoldsburg, Ohio?
Well,
or what was Jake?
I'm part of what they call the Zennials, where I'm like the tail end of Gen X and the beginning of the Millennials, right? So I had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. So at least I got to grow up without, FaceTime and Life 360 reporting my location to my parents. Probably a good thing. But I mean, I was a good kid. I wasn't getting in trouble. So, yeah.
Nothing exciting. And then, did you ever get in trouble? Yeah, I mean, every kid gets in trouble. Worst thing you ever did as a kid. that you're willing to talk about right now?
Oh,
I mean, sneaking out of the house, stealing the car. I hear some stories like people stealing cars,
yeah. I mean, a whole lot of not being where I said I was.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I didn't do drugs, but I did drink at a young age, and some of it's typical, but
yeah. I did a lot saying I was in a different space than I was. I did a lot of pretending my watch was broke, because back then you had the analog watch, and it's supposed to be home at a certain time. I'd be like, I had the most unreliable watches of any middle-aged teenager.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like it was like an hour, it was like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. So it was kind of a interesting thing.
Yeah. Part of the stress was maintaining the golden boy image while also being that other way. I was a straight A student, participating in the youth group at church. So there was a lot of trying to look good, but also feeling bad about it at the same time. So I wrestled in high school for a couple of years, but I really didn't like it. So I decided not to continue after I got injured my junior year.
I feel like anybody that likes wrestling, it's a little bit crazy though. There's a lot about wrestling to not like. But so growing up, your dad was a police officer, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. But one question I have: any childhood heroes growing up in the analog world? What was Jake's childhood hero?
Childhood hero. I mean, I loved movies and I loved video games. I was definitely a nerd. And so, you could maybe say that, some characters, kind of idolized. Like I love Star Wars, so I guess you could, point to Luke Skywalker or, some of those. I mean, it's all the hero's journey. I mean, I have even more language for that now that I'm older, but yeah, I mean, I don't have like any historical figures.
What was your favorite movie growing up?
Well, like I said, I was a huge Star Wars fan when I was a kid. Return of the Jedi was it. That was my favorite. Now it's Empire Strikes Back, definitely.
So what do you think of the newer Star Wars stuff? I don't think we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
What's that?
I'm not a fan.
I try not to be too harsh on it, but they're just trying to change it too much. I could go on. I mean, we could turn a whole podcast into what they've done to Star Wars.
I feel like no.
To a certain extent, you have to just enjoy it. You just have to be able to enjoy a movie sometimes and not be so hypercritical of it. So I enjoyed the prequel trilogy and the sequel trilogy. Yeah, there's things that could have been done better, but
yeah, I feel like that's a good point. Like there's so many movies like when I was growing up in the same time with you were there, and just they're still out there, but it's just a movie that you can enjoy it. You get something out of it. It takes you away from reality a little bit, numbing. It's fun to watch. I mean, I can think of a lot of great movies, but I feel like the prequel, the first three, the original, the prequel, is that what they call it? I don't know the official Star Wars term. I don't want to anger any Star Wars.
No, there's the original
three. What do they call?
The original.
Yeah, those were, I think, no matter what, you can always watch those. I feel like if it's on right now.
Oh yeah, I could rewatch those all day.
Like the newer stuff, I don't feel that excited. I'm like, ooh, okay. If I have to watch this, I will. So,
yeah.
Not that they weren't entertaining or anything. I'm not trying to tear down the whole franchise
And some of the stuff that they've done recently is good. The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Andor, all that stuff. Some of it's turned out really well. Other parts of it, it's just not for me. Whatever. I'll just pretend like it doesn't exist.
So it's a good thing. Don't let it bother you. It's a good,
Yeah.
good motto. So growing up, we headed on. Your dad was a cop. What was it like growing up with a dad who's a police officer?
I mean, I didn't know anything else, you know. He worked a lot of second and third shift in his career and worked a lot of special duty and overtime, you know. So, I mean, he was providing, and I mean, so yeah, I really didn't know a big difference, you know. It was definitely weird when I became a police officer and was on the department with him. Our careers overlapped for 8 years. It was
How many years?
For 8 years.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. Because I got to see a whole different side of him, a whole world that he existed in that I wasn't aware of. So I got to see things from his perspective. I mean, it's kind of silly. You can almost kind of draw it right back to Star Wars, right? With Luke Skywalker. He had to understand why his father Vader was the way he was, right? He had to go seek him out. And it's like, I got to understand, you know, and experience it firsthand for myself. And so my perspective on my dad changed a lot. And like I said, it was also weird because when I first got on the department, probably for the first 10 years of my career, like I responded to "You're Jim Day's boy." Like people didn't know my name. You're just Jim Day's boy. And that was okay. Like I responded to that. Some people call me Jimmy because they just thought that was my name. I didn't correct them. I was like, whatever. And then there was a switch at some point. In fact, because after my dad retired, he started working for another police department in the suburbs part-time. And he came to one of our in-service trainings that we were putting on, providing state mandated training for a lot of other departments. And someone came up to him and said, "Aren't you Jake Day's dad?" And I was like, "Yes,
Finally,
it's my department now." So yeah. Working as a police officer is one of those professions that it fundamentally changes you at the core of who you are. And so once I experienced that, you know, my perception shifted for sure.
So back to your dad. What you know, when you became a police officer, you're on the force with him. What did you see that you missed when you were younger? Good, bad, and different. What did you?
Well, I understood the stress of the job and the effects of it, especially the longer I had been doing it. And it was funny too, because like when I was first on the department, there were times where I felt like a little kid, you know, because like I'd get an arrest and bring them up through ID and fingerprints into the interview rooms. And while we're sitting waiting on an investigator to come in or we're doing our paperwork, you know, I could walk down the hallway to the homicide office and just talk to him and tell him about it. You know, it was like being a kid coming home, telling him what you did at school today. Like, here's the arrest I got today. So it was kind of weird, but yeah, it was just the understanding, you know, that was the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think it's the same with, you know,
it's like that way with any relationship, you know, like when you can relate to someone else, when you have a shared experience, you know, like obviously, you know, you and I have a shared experience. We both went through Saberware, right? And so it creates a place of commonality for us. So just like with anything else, like when you have an experience that you shared with someone, like suddenly, you know, you have a better understanding of who they are and who you are. And it makes relationships more workable when you have that commonality.
You think it's any more powerful if it comes from the warrior class where, you know, you're talking about when I look back, when you say that, if I were to ask that question, what changed when I realized, saw my dad in a different eye. It was the same thing. It took a while in the military before you realize what the commonality, but I feel like that maybe the work class is a little bit more intense maybe than trying to, if your dad was or mom, not to say it's in a bad profession, but it's a lawyer or accountant.
Yeah. There's a level maybe where it steps up a little bit, but it also doesn't compare to the type of experience when you're honest, right? Because there's still a degree of denial and covering up in the warrior class.
You went deep fast.
What's that? I know.
You went deep fast. Holy cow. We didn't even get into your enlistment. You're talking about the warrior class being honest. This is going to be a good conversation. That's true, though. I'm 100% with you.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes you decide to join the Ohio Air National Guard?
Okay, so we want to get deep and real. I joined the Ohio Air National Guard to cover up the insecurity that I had as an 18-year-old. It's called hiding in plain sight, because when you wear a uniform like that, you look the part. So, maybe people won't question the fact that you don't feel like the part.
I didn't know you were going to go deep honest on that. So, no story. That's the first. Yeah. I think it's the first person with no story, right? No, actually, second person. We had another Saul alumni that didn't tell a story.
Yeah. Because the story is, I needed to pay for college and I wanted to serve my country, blah, 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 blah. Truth is, I was just trying to cover up my own insecurity.
What was the insecurity, if you want to share?
It was a feeling of weakness and inferiority.
Me too.
Yeah.
Also a powerful thing. Like I did it to escape my mom. I've talked about that for a while, to get away.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing to dominate others before they can dominate me. Look good.
Yeah. And I mean, could be completely honest with you. That's why I joined the Ohio Air National Guard. Security forces. Like I can be a weekend warrior. I get to go play with guns, but I don't actually have to go join the active duty Army or Marine Corps. From at that age, at that time in my life, it was all calculated. How can I look the most like the part in a way that I feel like I can be successful without really having to put myself in a situation where I feel like I might fail? No, that was the truth.
I like the honesty. I love it.
Yeah. I don't have any problem saying that anymore. Because that's not who I am anymore. That's the best part of it.
You wonder, because I've had how many hours we've talked? It's probably a lot. He's like,
you've talked for so many more hours than me.
Come on. If we get him going, guys, trust me. We have a camera just to put on him. It'll be fun. No. Wow. Thanks, Jack. No, but you wonder if the honesty is so refreshing. That was a question when I was typing. I always type out the same. That's like a standard question. I was like, wow, he's going to answer this totally different than the only other person to answer the same way was Larry. So I was waiting for.
Yeah, I believe you.
I was trying to anticipate your answer, but that's where you keep the young Jedi or whatever.
Yeah,
on his heels, but. No, I mean that's honestly too, because I used to always say for me, I was wired differently, right? And I learned what that meant just about a year ago, which I was. But honestly, the God truth, it was something that I could compete against my dad. I was competing against my dad,
mm-hmm.
All right, and I was trying to get away from my mom, unfortunately. But yeah. I have some good stories too. My dad's, Vietnam veteran. 20-some years in, my grandfathers were in. I always felt like I was wired differently. It's all I grew up and knew. I wanted to serve my country. But parts of me, that is true. But the majority of it was just the same reason you had. Mm-hmm. Same reason a lot of us I have, right? I think if you really dig down deep and look at it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you joined. What made you pick security forces? Though, I mean, is that another way to dominate? Or what's going on?
Well,
with that
listen,
stuff?
I mean, I am also still at this point an 18-year-old male, right? So I am full of a little bit of piss and vinegar. So it's like, yeah, I get to go play with machine guns on the weekend. So it's like, a part of me is enjoying that, right? So yeah, I mean, like it was intriguing. The Weekend Warrior, it was in a way it was paying for school. So, because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. But yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because again, like some of it comes down to I was interested in that element of looking good because, and again, this isn't like to impress you, but to impress upon you. My ASVAB score was like a 96. I could have picked any career in the Air Force or the Guard, right? But I chose one of the careers that requires the lowest score. Cops and cooks at the bottom.
Welders in there too, but
Right? No, yeah. What's that?
welding is in there too. Welding.
I don't know about that, but
So, have you looked back at that? Why that was at the time?
why it was?
Yeah.
Like I said again, like part of it was I get to acquire this new identity where I can again be this weekend warrior, look good, not have to have anybody question what I feel inside at the time. And also because parts of me enjoy the excitement, right? Because I mean, like the other thing too is like I didn't know that I was undiagnosed ADHD at this point, right? I didn't figure that out till I was 42. All right. So gifted ADHD with probably some OCD tendencies, growing up in a family with some diagnosed mental health issues, some undiagnosed mental health issues. And so, like I'm doing my best to cope with reality and the world that's going on. And being, because like I could get straight A's, sometimes the occasional B's without even trying. And so I didn't try. Like I could just got through high school, graduated with an honors diploma with like a 3.8 without having to try. And because again, like I'm not not knowing that I was ADHD, like you're chasing that dopamine all the time. Like I can hyperfixate on anything that I'm interested in and excited in. Just wasn't school, it was movies, video games, girls, right? So, so yeah, like using those skill sets, like military is perfect fit. Like I have all the skills I need to like go and be successful at that. So I could excel. And like I was really good at hiding and like I said that already, hiding in plain sight. Through a lot of military training and also the police academy training, they have what are called demerits or gig slips. Did you have gig slips when you went through the training?
Yeah, different name, but yeah, like demerits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
tours.
Like I remember in Air Force basic training and security forces training, you got 3 of them. And if they pulled all of them, that was really bad. But basically, anytime you messed up, they'd take it from you as like a way to document your mistake, right? They also had gig slips in the police academy. Same reason. If they take one, they document what you did and they give it to your counselor evaluator, and you're going to get an essay you have to write, or you're going to get some sort of punishment, right? I went through all my military training and all my police academy training without ever having a gig slip pulled, because I became a master at just flying under the radar. Like, and it's the classic advice for being in the military. Don't be first, don't be last, don't volunteer for anything.
That's still good. That's still good advice for anything.
Right. But it's like you become a master of hiding in plain sight when you're terrified of anybody finding out what you think about yourself. And so, like I said, I had all the skill sets to be really good in the military and really good in the police department.
So why after you enlist, you're going to OSU? Is that the what's going on?
No.
So this, I don't think I know this story. Hopefully this comes out.
My first year I was at OU.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know what you're doing there.
Yeah. And the sad, like I said, these could be a whole other stories. I followed a girl that, because I chose to go to OU because I was following a girl who dumped me right before I went to my military training, because I went to basic and my tech school in the fall of 1999. So I didn't start college till winter quarter of 2000. So I was going to OU to follow basically my high school girlfriend, who ended up dumping me that summer anyways. So now I'm down at OU. I'm like, okay, so here I am. And of course it's a party school, and my first time being completely off the grid. And again, a chance to change and reinvent who I am, right? My entire life, I was Jacob. All of a sudden I got this idea in my head, I'm going to be Jake. So I started introducing myself as soon as I got to college as Jake. And ever since then, I've been Jake. So anybody that knows me from my childhood through high school and my family, they all call me Jacob. But anyone that knows me college or after, police department, my wife, my family, it's all Jake. So again, it's just weird. It was this opportunity to create another persona. But
so what was the Jake persona? I don't know.
I know, right? So I followed a girl there, and school did not go well my first couple quarters, because I had the option to not go to class and to go out drinking with people in the dorms. And eventually, after a quarter or two, I got it. But after 3 quarters there, followed my new girlfriend out of OU and transferred up to Ohio State. And then we broke up shortly after that. So, but again, I was just, chasing girls was just another part of the not having a sense of self-worth. All my sense of self-worth had to come externally. So
Right.
I would bend over backwards for anybody that was showing me attention.
So what did the family think about Jacob becoming Jake, bouncing around the colleges, joining the...
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they had opinions about it, but I was still continuing to, I wasn't like my life was falling apart on paper, right? My grades improved. I started doing fine, and I was being successful in the Guard. So yeah. And then 9/11 happened.
Happened to a lot of people.
Yeah. Right.
So Jake thinks he's just going to be in the Air National Guard. Now you get mobilized.
Yeah. Now I get activated for 2 full years, and everything changes. And because it's amazing, these large events that everyone remembers and how it changed life for us. I probably drastically changed the course of my life, because right before it happened, I was getting ready to move into an apartment on campus. For that first couple quarters that I came back and started at Ohio State, I was just living at home because it was cheaper, but I wanted to get back out. So me and a buddy got an apartment together, and like I said, then that was right before fall quarter of 2001. So then 9/11 happens. And yeah, then like, because him and I were both in the Guard together. We went to high school together. We're good friends. And we both got activated. And so we just said, well, let's just get out of this lease and move back home, because so we're just going to be wasting money to be living on campus and we're not even going to school. So ended up moving back home and just living at home while I was working at the base. So
you stay working around here a little bit. You actually head out to Andrews for a little bit.
well, so when we got activated, my Guard unit was out of Rickenbacker. So we, our first primary responsibility was base security at Rickenbacker. On 9/11, by 1:00 in the afternoon, I was guarding a satellite dish behind headquarters, and then as everybody kind of calmed down, we just kind of evolved into an elevated security posture and had more people working than what typically do. And, but the 121st Security Forces Squadron probably is still, and was at the time, was the largest unit of cops the Air National Guard had. There's other security force units throughout the state, but ours was the biggest. We had 120 people in our unit. They didn't need 120 people to maintain security there, so they started sending out groups on deployments elsewhere. So the first one I went on was, a 3-month tour at Andrews Air Force Base.
What do you think of Andrews?
It was interesting. I was just a senior airman at the time, so I, usually got stuck on gate duties. But it was cool. Got to see Air Force One landing, taking off. Got to really see what it's like to work an active duty base too, with an active flight line. So
Joe's not here. Joe said must have been a badass satellite dish that you're guarding.
Yeah, it was huge. It was like a big golf ball. Screw Joe.
Most important satellite dish in all of the state of Ohio.
I know.
Yeah, but I mean, at that time, like a lot of what people don't realize that that weren't in at the time or don't understand, like everything was opened up before 9/11. You can drive like on any military base, and then all of a sudden 9/11 happens and they locked like everything down. So I could see that guarding. Guarding housing areas. Yeah. It got crazy there for a little while. So
yeah, and when they first activated, they got so many people showing up, coming in. They don't know what else to do with you. So here, go guard the satellite dish behind the building. Okay.
That's the thing in the military that people don't understand. Just you do what you're told. Go guard.
Yeah.
You ever wonder what that satellite dish was?
I mean, I literally was in a space half the size of this area right here with this satellite dish and a privacy fence, and me and my M16 just sitting there for hours with a folding chair.
You're like, this is the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. I'm keeping the world safe.
Yeah.
Did you ever wonder what the hell was so important about that satellite dish, though?
Oh, I'm sure.
Doesn't matter.
Who knows? Like, it's above my pay grade.
So you had to Andrews for a little bit, and then you also got to head overseas for a little while.
Yeah. So I volunteered for another deployment and went to Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia for 100 days.
What did you think of that experience?
I mean, it was a little nerve-wracking at first to volunteer for something like that, not really knowing what you're getting into. But I'm glad I did it. It was a neat experience. I ended up getting promoted to staff sergeant when I was there. So about halfway through that tour, I got moved off of the gate shacks, and I got to go work the search bay, which was nice because then you get to sit in air conditioning when you're waiting for trucks to come through.
life improvement.
Yeah. So, but that was an experience, and we got lucky, because the group that ended up, because at that point the Air Force was just rotating through every 100 days. It's like we replaced a group of cops that were from somewhere else, and then we had a group replace us. Well, the group that replaced us, then the second Iraq War started, and they stayed in place for, I think, a lot longer, because that's usually what happens when the war starts in an area. Is rotations stop and they just start adding more people into the area. So I think
there's nobody else to replace them.
Yeah, I believe the group that replaced us got stuck there longer. So it just is what it was.
So what was the worst part of being in Saudi Arabia?
Well, the Air Force didn't trust us to go off base. So I didn't really get to go see anything. We were on base the entire time. So you didn't really experience much other than the heat.
Heat and sand.
But it's the Air Force, so we got air conditioning and soft serve ice cream.
Good food.
Hard
air conditioning is a big deal. They're they
Yeah.
slept in hard buildings.
Yeah, all that stuff. But Prince Sultan Air Base had been there since the first Gulf War, so it had plenty of time to establish all that.
That is one of the things, though, if you do look at when you're deployed like that, when you can't go see where you're at and being stuck on a military base or FOB or something, people who've never experienced that don't. It's a lot like prison. If you think about it, there's nothing. You have a routine you're doing. You can't leave.
Yeah, because
things out. You see other things that pique your interest. You just can't leave. It's not easy to be there.
Yeah, because it was also a more grueling work schedule. So like at Andrews, I think we were working 3 days on and 2 days off or something like that. Or maybe it was 3 and 3. I can't remember for sure. But at Prince Sultan Air Base, it was 3 days on, 1 day off. So you're only getting 1 day off every 3 days. And you're working 12s. So it was a little bit of a grind. And yeah, I could see that. You're just counting the days, till you can get out of there. 2 interesting experiences, though, was one. So me being in Saudi Arabia coincided with Ohio State's national championship season that year, right? And I specifically remember I was at this gate shack that was on the backside of the base. Like the gate shack literally was like a phone booth, right? It was like the size of this table. Okay. And, but it had a DSN phone in it. So I could actually call home from this phone booth gate shack way out on the backside of the base where there's nobody. Nobody's even coming to it. There's not even there was just a fence and this gate shack, and it wasn't even being used for anything. I just had to be there.
Sort of like a satellite.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm on this post during the Ohio State Purdue game that year. So that's the Holy Buckeye game, right? Remember, 4th and 1, and we end up throwing the touchdown pass. Well, I was literally on the phone with my dad during that whole sequence, getting it play by play over the phone. And like I said, I just remember that very distinctly because my dad was like, "Oh, it's 3rd and such. Oh, now it's 4th and 1," and then it just got quiet for way too long. And then all of a sudden, my dad's yelling touchdown. I'm like, "What?" So that was crazy. And then it was cool when I got home and I got to actually watch what it actually looked like on TV and see it. That, and then the most heavily armed Ohio State Michigan party that I've ever had. So on the day of the Ohio State Michigan game, because I'm there with a group of 15 people from my unit. Our master sergeant that was there with us kind of worked it out to get us all on posts where they could kind of pull us all in together. So during the game, they collected us all up and brought us into the day room, and we were actually able to watch the game, and we just stacked all our rifles and the machine guns over in the corner and got to watch it. So that was nice. So it was like two of the nicer things that happened while I was over there experiencing that. And I also made it home in time to actually watch the national championship game. So that was cool too.
Got to make it home to watch the Buckeyes.
Yeah.
I'm still upset with myself that I have a Buckeye. I gotta start drinking the Kool-Aid. Not really though. I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
You're like talking about the game. I'm like, I have no idea what Jake's talking about. Just keep nodding.
That's all right. Everyone listening does.
Everyone that's a Buckeye is like, that's all too shady. I don't understand this. What was the worst part? What was the worst part of being over the Heat? I mean, you said, what about you personally? What were you? I mean, getting off base, the Heat. What were you struggling with? The real things you were struggling with while you were over there.
Yeah, it's kind of it was a weird time to really not know what's next, because that activation went on for 2 years. No one was telling us at the beginning. They said, "Hey, this is going to take 2 years." So it was just probably the uncertainty of it. Because at the time, I feel like maybe I'm falling behind or I'm missing out because everyone else is still in school. But at the same point, I was making money and I didn't have. I was also spending some money too. It wasn't like I was saving it up, but
you weren't saving up all the tax.
Here's the thing: is like it's hard to, it's hard to quantify these things, right? Because what may have been a bad thing back then now is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like I wouldn't be where I am today. Like I wouldn't have met my wife if 9/11 hadn't happened and I hadn't been out of school for 2 years, because I ended up meeting her in school when I came back.
Out of a shoot and chase her to another school like that.
Well, so I'll tell the story. Yeah. Because this one's kind of interesting too. So another one of my really good friends from high school, Trent, his parents always did Ohio State tailgates. Like they had the RV down in the parking lot near campus. Like they did the whole thing, had the big spread. So when I transferred back and I had student tickets, I was I
feel like I know what's this.
Yeah, and there's Joe walking in.
Yeah. Way to run the whole show, Joe.
Yeah,
again?
That's okay. So I was going to his parents' tailgate, and at one of the games, his mom, he was there because he was in graduate school now at the time, and his mom was like, "You should introduce Jacob to Jesse, who is my buddy's cousin. My wife and my good friends were cousins." And she was transferring to Ohio State. She had been down in Florida going to Flagler College for her first year to play volleyball. And so my friend's mom decided he should set us up. And so he decided he and some of his old frat buddies were having a Halloween party at their house off campus. And so he invited Jesse and me. So it was like a setup, but she didn't know. And so we met at the Halloween party, and I got her number. And
was it a costume Halloween party?
Yeah, it's a Halloween party, Jay.
What were we going as? I mean, this Halloween party.
I was a cowboy. I was wearing chaps, man.
Hopefully something under the chaps, but
listen, I'm gonna have to handle this fake news. All right, all chaps are assless, Jay.
That is true.
Yeah, I had jeans on, in case you're worried.
I'm thinking of that image. I'm like, that's a hell of a thing to show up to a frat party. That's a hell of an image to start. So you guys hit it off on that front. Obviously, been married now 19 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you come back. You get off active duty in 05. You joined the.
I had one other deployment.
Oh, did you? Oh, that's right. You went to Scott Air Force Base, right?
Yeah. And that one was actually fun because I wasn't working in security. The Air Force has something called the Raven program. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
So Ravens are security force members that get additional training, and they provide security for so it all falls under Air Mobility Command. So anytime planes are going to be landing in non-friendly locations, not necessarily enemy locations, but just non-friendly, where there's not assets on the ground to protect the planes, they put a Raven on the plane with the crew to protect the bird while they're on the ground, even if they just have to refuel or drop some cargo or whatever it is. Well, our job when we went on this deployment was just to like a safety net, because every day Air Mobility Command would generate a list of every flight occurring around the world. And sometimes flights would come up at the last minute and they'd be going to one of these locations where they need Ravens. And so if that happened, we were supposed to be paying attention and call a Raven task manager and be like, hey, we need you to get one of your Ravens caught up to this bird before it gets here. And so that's what we were doing. We were like just sitting in a room that was a vault and just there to, make those calls if they needed. But me and my buddy that were working that one, we worked the second shift from 5P to 5A. And so in 3 months, we probably rarely ever had to do that. We're just there in case, right? And the base housing at Scott Air Force Base was full. So the Air National Guard paid each of us to get our own fully furnished condo off base.
Tough life.
I know.
Tough deployment.
So yeah, it was a tough deployment. So I came home from that one and immediately deactivated and went on, the leave to use up my accrued leave and finish out my orders.
So no desire to stay in after that?
Well, at the time let's see, I deactivated, or I got done with orders in 2003, but I still had 2 years left traditional service. So while I went back to school, I was still, in the Guard doing the, weekend thing. As my first 6-year commitment was nearing its end, that was also the point where I was getting ready to join the police department. And I was like, I only need one quasi-military organization controlling my life at a time. So I decided to just be done with the Guard and join the police department.
So 6 years, was that like standard back then? I feel like the 4 is like what I've heard. So 6 is...
No, 6 is standard for the Guard.
The Guard, okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's technically a 7-year commitment because then you have a year inactive,
okay,
where they could just pull you back if they really needed you. But
you just stay in that furnished apartment in St. Louis.
What's that?
Stay in that furnished apartment in St. Louis.
So
hanging out.
Yeah. So parts of me sometimes regret that. Like I should have stayed in. I mean, if I had just did my 20 in the Guard, I'd be way done by now, but yeah, whatever. Can't change it.
Can't go back to the past, right?
Absolutely.
So you follow in your dad's footsteps, joined the Columbus Division of Police, 2005.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like just yesterday. That's a long time ago, dude.
It does. It was 19 years ago. Coming up on 19 years. 19 years this December.
So what did your dad think about you joining the Columbus Police Department?
Oh, I mean, he liked it. He was thrilled with it, and he actually handled it very well. A good way to say it is you know, in just about any academy class, there's usually some family members. There's someone that's got a parent or a brother or uncle or somebody in the police department. Usually in every class, there's some relations because when you got a department that big. But and sometimes you get like helicopter parents when their kids in the academy. And so he just kind of gave me space and wasn't sticking his nose in the academy trying to see how I was doing.
Do they have like a nickname for the like kids that are
not
kids
a
of cops?
not a
like
nickname,
like,
but listen, you know, I told you I was a master at flying under the radar. Well, that gets really hard when everybody knows your dad, you know. And it's an element of pressure when everybody likes your dad and your dad's a really good cop. And so that definitely stacked on some additional pressure to make sure I don't screw it up. But yeah, I mean, you know, my reason for joining the police department back then was the same for the military, you know, a degree. Because you use the words follow in your dad's footsteps. That was not the plan. That was not the aspiration. I was like 3/4 of the way through college and had no clue what I wanted to do. You know, I was in the business school for a short bit there, and I don't want to say I hated it. I had no, like, I felt like I was doing it just because it seemed like maybe this is what I should be doing. So after I had met my wife and we were engaged, I was kind of like, I need to like do something. So I wasn't opposed to it, but I was like, I'm going to take whatever civil service test comes next. So I was either going to be a firefighter or a police officer, you know, and it just so happened that the Columbus police test came before the Columbus fire test. Otherwise, like if that would have been different, I would have been a Columbus firefighter. So yeah. And again, with the skill sets that I had, like, again, like I had a level of insecurity, but I was good at it. It's like once I get into it and start going, like I start excelling and start doing well. So, you know, again, that kind of goes along with it's hard to look back and say what's a positive and a negative, you know, because, you know, a great part of the police department is exciting and it was something new every day, you know, but at the same point, I'm just pouring gas on the fire that is me and my survival traits and my undiagnosed ADHD and all of that. Like I'm just pumping all that stuff kind of full of steroids. And now it's like, I'm going to just be on this path that a lot of first responders get on towards burnout.
So when did you really feel the burnout being on the job?
That's a good question. You know, I imagine everybody's different. You know, some people might be a little bit more resilient, might be able to grind it out a little bit longer. I would say maybe around 7 or 8 years. And, you know, you kind of pair that with at the same time, you know, now I've got 2 small kids. And I can say, you know, looking back, what sort of like the telltale sign of it was the weight I gained, you know, and because like I had problems with food, you know, and we can talk about 12-step recovery later on, but I don't have a problem talking about the fact that, you know, I'm actively working the 12 steps of Overeaters Anonymous, and that keeps me, you know, keeps that unmanageable problem in my life flat, right? But yeah, I got up to 300 pounds as a police officer during my patrol career. And like, there's a lot of shame that comes with being a fat cop. Right. And, yeah, that was difficult. And it was just a physical manifestation of the stress and the shame that I didn't know how to process. The stress, trauma, shame, all of that I didn't know how to process. Right. And so, yeah, like I started gaining weight because food was one of the ways that I'd used to cope with that stress.
So how many years have you been on the 12 step for food now?
Oh, I think 2 years since I went through the 12 steps, and I've been working that. And that, that's been its own journey. So like right now I'm coming up on 9 months of abstinence. So abstinence and Overeaters Anonymous, just like, so in Alcoholics Anonymous, they call it sobriety. That's how long someone who's in AA has not had any alcohol. In Overeaters Anonymous, it's how long I've gone without engaging in compulsive overeating. So I'm coming up on 10 months of abstinence. And I had a 10-month period. I had about an 11th month period before that because I kind of fell off the wagon there for a short bit and then got back on. So,
10 months. That's good. 10 months out of 2 years. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
20 out of 24.
It took a long time because, I mean, not a people, there's a 12-step program for anything, right? And for people not familiar with the steps, the 12 steps are identical for all these groups: Alcoholics Anonymous, Sex Addicts Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. The 12 steps are all identical. You just change the one word of the thing that is your unmanageable problem, right? But it took me a while to figure out because the person that took me through the steps, Joe Robb, shout out to Joe Robb. He is traditionally AA. He doesn't, he's not involved in OA, but that doesn't matter. He can take me through the steps, and he did. Thank God he did. Right. So I had and also Save Warrior is also heavily influenced by 12-step recovery. So I have a very deep understanding of AA. I have more alcoholics in my life now than I ever did before because I'm in this community of people who are recovering alcoholics, right? And so I have a really good understanding of it. I struggled at first to try to figure out, how do I apply this to food, right? Because I can't not eat. It's not exactly the same as out. So it's like, what is it that I can't have? Because for me, it felt like I wanted to get the distinction, because it was important. And it finally dawned on me, and it was just like an alcoholic cannot have any alcohol, I cannot have any unplanned food. That's what I can't have. Like, if I don't have a plan, I'll keep eating. I don't know. Like, I can't stop. Right. So my program for Overeaters Anonymous is that I have a food plan, and it gives me the two things that I will lose without that plan. And that is awareness of what I'm eating and a plan to stop. And so, like, I could live the rest of my life on my food plan and be happy.
And your plan's pretty intricate.
It is intricate, but it works,
Right.
and not everybody OA has the exact same food plan because OA recognizes that not everybody's the same, and they don't push, like, they're not pushing a diet. It's not a diet program, right? So it's like whatever I've worked out with my higher power and the people that I hold myself accountable to, then I have a plan and I put my word to it. And as long as I follow my food plan, then I'm being abstinent, because in the different options that I have for my food plan, I always have awareness of what I'm eating and a plan to stop. And so it works. And I maintain my weight. I don't gain weight when I'm on my food plan. It's fantastic.
So how much should you lose total?
I mean, I haven't been working out as much lately. So like right now I'm at like 245. If I start working out again, like I'd prefer to be like 235, but yeah, that's a hell of a lot better than 300 pounds, and, and like, what was interesting was, the first time I came back to Save a Warrior after my initial cohort, I was there shepherding, volunteering, serving another cohort. And the other shepherds that were there were all from the same cohort. And they were all like doing an accountability weight loss group together. They weren't doing OA, but they were like, talking about how they've all lost like 30, 40, 50 pounds since their cohort. And I was like, holy shit, like I've gained 20 pounds since my cohort. And I realized, because post going through that experience, I started cutting out a lot of the crazy shit that I was doing. But I kind of leaned heavier into food while I was trying to deal with those initial months of doing recovery work. And so, but then that experience right there, like, really shined a light on the fact that, hey, this is an area that I've been neglecting and avoiding. Right. And I'll never forget, in the big house at Save a Warrior, I was standing in the kitchen with Joe Rob, and I said, hey, do they have a 12-step program for food? And he said, they got a 12-step program for everything. And he offered to take me through the steps. And that was powerful. Right. Even so, at Save a Warrior, like I'm sure you've probably talked about on this podcast and others, it's like a spiritual awakening. It's a transformation. It's life-changing, life-transforming. But I've had other experiences after that, as a result of that were like mini spiritual awakenings or little echoes, right? Nothing's ever going to be as big as the first one, because that opens your eyes up a lot. But going through the 12 steps was another one of those, life transforming experiences, because it gave me the language and it gave me the awareness on how to deal with this thing that's my unmanageable problem. So 12-step recovery is fantastic. It really is.
I'm about to go on the journey.
What's that?
I said I'm about to go on the 12-step journey.
Yeah. Man, who suggested that to you?
I don't know. I know who it wasn't. Joe over there, who came in late, harassing us now. I'm with Joe Rob. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll know every week. Now back to what you talked about. You did jump to Save a Warrior. Talked about your burnout. Year 7 with the police department. When did you first start hearing about Save a Warrior, and when did you realize you had some unmanageable things that were going on in your life other than food? What drew you to Save a Warrior?
So what I was experiencing, and that I didn't have the language for at the time, was I had a level of mental health issues and dysfunction that came from my childhood and the dysfunction that was present in my family. That's not a make wrong for my family, because I made up that I was defective, right? I decided on that. And so I go through life just trying to cover that up and hide that. So I'm not really experiencing my life. I'm just pretending that I'm not pretending. And it's exhausting the longer it goes on. And I had a story about that too. Like I need to suck it up because I haven't actually had anything bad happen to me. Like I had a pretty cookie cutter military experience, and I had, I was fortunate enough not to ever be involved in anything too crazy on the police department. I never had to fire my weapon in the line of duty, never involved in a critical incident, right? Not because of anything I did. Sometimes that's just the, roll of the dice, right? But it's like without any of that stuff happening, I was like, well, then it's just got to be me, like something's just wrong with me. I'm not hacking it because I'm suffering. And so I call it like, it's just a quiet life of desperation hiding in plain sight, and I was experiencing depression, anxiety, and also numbing, right? Like not knowing how to process emotions and feelings and trauma, right? Because you go running into a profession like law enforcement and you're going to, at a minimum, experience vicarious trauma where everyone you're meeting, it's their worst day, right? It might be the worst day of their week, month, year, life, but it's everybody's worst day. Otherwise you wouldn't be there, right? Whether it's their car is an accident or their family member just got murdered or somebody died, like it's their worst day. So there's a ton of vicarious trauma. And so that stuff just piles up and you have no way of, especially when I came on, there was less understanding of hypervigilance and the cumulative effects of all that, right? So you take that on top of who I was showing up as, prior to that. And it's just, like I said, it's a life of quiet desperation. I just didn't know what the heck was wrong. I just didn't, something in me knew that I was missing something. There's something more out there. And it wasn't until I went to SaveWarrior that I gained the language for that. And that language is the access to that world where now I can cry tears of joy. And, and so it all started with Larry Turner, right? Like, like any good plot, like
It's a good one.
I had to hear someone else talk about it 3 times before I decided to take action, right? So like Larry Turner was the first person I heard mention and talk about SaveWarrior. I didn't know Larry personally at that point. And like knowing Larry, he was just that crazy old guy that's on Intac, right? But so it was like, he talked about it. I was like, okay, that's a thing. Well, so at this point in my career, like, again, I'm all about hiding in plain sight. And in my thinking, like I joined the peer assistance team. Maybe part of that was to look good, but part of it also was maybe if I joined this team concerned with, mental wellness and peer support and all that stuff, maybe like I'll figure it out in the process, So like, again, I'm participating in this, but I'm also, silently struggling. And Heather Wilson was the next person who was on the peer assistance team, who at one of our team meetings basically spoke up and said that she recently went through SaveWarrior and it was life transforming for her, right? She talked about meditation and stuff like that. But again, like I absorbed that information, but didn't quite make the move. And then it was like several months later, and another peer assistance team member, Jimmy Ashenhurst, spoke up and said that he just went through SaveWarrior. And so now I was like, okay, I need to know more about this. So I went and talked to Jimmy because I had worked on the street with Jimmy. And I asked him, and he told me his story and what it was for him. And that was enough to get me to fill out an application, And I'm so glad I did.
I'm glad you did as well.
Yeah.
So it is a story that's very common in our community. How many times we have to hear the story before it.
Yeah, it's the refusal of the call, right? It's in the hero's journey. It's like a great part of storytelling. It's a human thing. It actually kind of goes back to that beta region paradox that I was explaining to you last week. That'd be a lot to unpack right now, but it's like it'd be smarter for us to make a move now, but for some reason we have this faulty thinking that keeps us in this space where we're not actually getting, like, it'd be better to make a move, but we're not,
Yeah.
And a lot of it just comes back to because we got faulty thinking. We've got all or nothing thinking.
It just surprised me. Look back to people because I heard a lot of it from people that have been on the podcast, and then as we that had been guests on the podcast, and then you talk to them, I would hear it, and initially I was just like the same thing. So I'm like, it almost seemed I had it as it was almost too good to be true, right? Like people are telling me the same thing you said, life changing, life transforming. I was like, part of me was like, this has got to be bullshit. I mean, it seems too easy to go somewhere for, at the time, depending on when you went through Saber Warrior. I mean, what was the longest it was? What's the longest the cohort was? Wasn't it like, it was long, 5-6 days? The original?
Oh, it was 5. The original was 5.
5. Yeah. So 5 days, 3 days. I'm like, how could something be so transforming? And then when you finally, for me, when I finally stopped like looking for the negative of it and just listening to what people were saying for what it was, because they weren't saying a lot about it. That's all. The people that talked to me about it it was life transforming. It changed my life. And they weren't giving you all these details.
Mm-hmm.
The people that hit me up with it. So there's a part of me that was like super intrigued by it. And I was like, man, I'm adding all the other stuff to it. And once I really listened to it and then, filled out the application, which I've said before, I've, lied about on the application. It is life transforming.
Yeah.
I can,
part of it, I believed those people when they said it. I was more concerned about looking bad or not feeling like I deserve to go. Because again, it goes back to that, like I just had this like existence that was just numb and just quite, it was just checked out from like disconnected from actual living. Right. And, I just was really good at spreading out all of my vices in a way that it doesn't send my life crashing, like I was a heavy drinker, but not an alcoholic. I was a video gamer, but I could hold a job and raise a family, like
squeeze in 72 hours of gaming.
I could stuff myself with food and just, stay just healthy enough to keep the uniform from splitting apart. I was really like, again, that's just because I'm a master at looking good that I became so good at diversifying my vice portfolio.
Me too. Yeah.
But so like, I believe those people, it was just a matter, it was getting over my fear of going there. But in the first 3 hours, I knew this was it. Like I saw Jake Clark doing the 3rd hour, the red and black on the board. And like, it was like lighting a bulb with a baseball bat, like that kind of like an epiphany. Just like, never have I seen anything more true in my entire life. It was like my life on the board. I know everyone that sits in the chair is like, how'd they know? Like I thought they were talking about me the whole
I
time.
lied on that question. No, no, I agree. I looked at. I mean, what is the two truths and a lie? That's the first hour, right?
That's the second hour.
Second, okay. So that's when I was like, "Holy shit!" That all this all makes sense.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. Looking forward to next week to see it from a different angle. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it's crazy. You just came out of cohort like a year ago, a couple of days ago. Yeah.
Seems like just yesterday. That's not true. It seems like it was yesterday, but I'm gonna hype myself up a little bit because I'm, as you know, I can be self-deprecating, but I've been doing a lot of work.
Yeah, you have.
So it's been a long year. I could have done more work, but I've been doing a lot of work.
Life kind of occurs like it did in the container. The container was the shortest 3 days of my life. And these last 3 years since I came out of the container have been the shortest 3 years of my life. Like I've accomplished so much, and I'm amazed at how quickly I've gotten to where I've gotten. I never would have imagined it possible. Right. But, yeah, like it's really amazing.
Yeah, I like to say that it has been, quick, but part of it has been, but also it's just, the amount of work that when I look back and look at what we, how we travel together, the stuff we're doing, and it's work, but it's been so pleasurable. I mean, the things that we do. I mean, I missed last week because I was out gallivanting the East Coast, but I can't lie. On Sunday, I was like, man, I wish I was back with the guys. As you say, talking all the time. But I mean, Joe's here now. I think you do a lot of talking yourself, but no. But I miss that. There's something about that that's grounded me, and even though I was having a great time, I'm like, man, that's a great time too. Even though we're doing hard work and holding each other accountable, and it's just something I never thought would ever happen.
Well, personally. I mean, we're extremely lucky, but having a community of people that won't bullshit you, that will just tell you something straight, and you that you can be honest yourself and not be judged. Like that's everything.
Yeah, it does make a difference. Huge difference. So let's talk a little bit more. You're now a different job now. You're not in the streets anymore. Kind of segue into big picture. What you're doing now? You're in the training division. What would it be called for?
Training bureau. Bureau. I work at the academy full time now. I've been there for 9 years now, which that seems like a blink as well.
So there, are you able to, I've talked about you able to pass on some of the healthy part of joining the police force? Like what's your balance like with, know what you've seen now for close to 19 years, the burnout you experienced,
so
spiritual awakening, like
I do everything I can to share the knowledge that I have when and where I can. But, it's not always easy because, like the saying goes, some people they're not done suffering. They don't know what they don't know. It's hard.
Elaborate on that some more, because that's a saying that we have.
Well, I guess I would say it like this, the job requires a certain type of thinking to be successful, and it's absolutely necessary. It's a type of thinking that keeps you on high alert and aware of your surroundings and constantly evaluating threat all around you. But that way of thinking alters your physical state of being, right? Your sympathetic nervous system spikes. And so it's causing you to perceive reality differently. And also that way of thinking then bleeds over into your personal life, because especially in the past, when I came on the police department, no one was teaching you how to turn it off or how to switch into a different way of thinking when you're not at work, which you really need to be able to recover. And so it's easy to get stuck in that way of thinking without a certain level of awareness and a certain amount of wisdom. And so it's difficult. And sometimes you're trying to tell someone, like if I'm talking to, recruits, if I'm teaching a wellness class, it's hard to tell them what it's like because they've never experienced it. And if they do take care of themselves, they never will experience it. So some people have to learn the hard way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Not everybody learns the easy way by just, taking advice. But if nothing else, if I can plant a seed so that maybe when they start to experience the burnout or the grind of the profession, well, now maybe, what I told them in the past will become a little bit more real, and they'll consider it and, start taking a look at things differently.
So one of your own projects you're doing that for the Columbus Division of Police, the Training Bureau. But I've had a conversation. You talked about you're starting your own project, the First Responder Wellness, the Complete Responder. What you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, I was definitely inspired by Save a Warrior, but Save a Warrior serves a very specific population of folks, very targeted towards complex post-traumatic stress and suicide prevention. And they are a veteran service organization, so they have an obligation to be serving a certain majority percentage of veterans. First, they do service for first responders to a certain percentage. And, I was technically both. So I got to sit in a veteran seat. So I wasn't taking it from a potential first responder. But the conversation that occurs at Save a Warrior that can be transforming for individuals, that conversation can be available to anybody, just not at Save a Warrior. It's a conversation that can be found in a lot of different places in the world. And so what I want to do is I want to provide that conversation specifically for first responders in a way that can make an impact in a, like 8-hour training environment. So, my goal is to start my own training company that will be focused on first responder wellness and provide elective training that basically a workshop that can be put on for first responders to help them give this conversation, to allow them to transform their lives. And again, the name of the company would be the Complete Responder, because that's my belief. I believe the problem is that the professions in the first responder industry, being firefighters and police officers, it's not complete. The nature of the job is not properly addressed within the confines of the job. Right now, it's personal responsibility for officers to take care of their wellness. And until that changes, maybe someday, it takes a certain awareness and a certain understanding to be complete, to have it where you can be a good police officer, you can be safe, you can do a fantastic job at that, but then you can go home and you can also live your life, actually know what it's like to live, to be able to process your emotions, to be able to recover from the hypervigilance and not have that just become a drain on your life. Because I mean, like, here's sort of the paradox that occurs in being a police officer, right? Is that you feel like you have to be hyper aware in order to be safe, right? And you sort of have that way of thinking everywhere you go, even when you go out to dinner, right? The funny thing about cops is we all sit with our backs to the wall and face the door at a restaurant, right? It's like even my wife knows. She knows to take the seat, with her back to the door so I can see the door. The thing is, like, we feel like we have to be hyper aware to be safe, but the truth is that as a result of that, we never actually experience being safe. Because I'm always hyper aware. So it's like there's never, until you learn how to let go of, like, you have to have a space in your life where you can let go and surrender and show up with the opposite traits that you typically have during your job. And if you don't create that space for you, then you're just, like I said, you're just going to wear out.
Yeah, burn out. Like talk about.
Yeah. And I just, like, I don't know, that just hit me a couple of days ago when I was thinking about it. It's like, I'm so obsessed with being safe and being aware of what's going around me. But as a result of that, I never actually feel safe, right? It's like I have to do all this stuff to be safe, but I don't ever actually feel safe, right? And so there's a certain level of, you have to be able to just let go of what you can't control, which is like, I know you can't do that on the job, right? But if I don't create a space in my life where I can do that, then that doesn't allow me to double down on that. Like, I'm all for that at work. Like, you got to be that way to do the job safely and effectively, but you have to have a space to recover from that, and a space where you can live your life, and, we're fighting against chaos in our minds. We're controlling it. We're being aware of the dangers. We're ready to respond. We're trying to control the chaos. But the truth is, I have to be open to some chaos in my life to grow. That's the whole hero's journey, right? The hero's journey is about accepting entering into the unknown world, right? And so, like, just going out on the street, that's not what I'm talking about. Like, I have to be willing to look bad, right? I was never willing to do that. Like, I was hyper concerned with looking good. Cops are more afraid of looking bad in front of other cops than they are of dying.
That's probably the same thing with the war.
I mean, I'm telling you, like, I'm not trying to speak. I'm not trying to speak for everybody, right? But I put serious money on it, right? Like, I never went to work thinking, "Oh my God, I might die today." But I'm very concerned with the fact that I don't want to look bad in front of anybody. I don't want anybody making fun of me. I don't want anybody questioning my work. I don't want to be the guy that makes the big mistake and looks stupid or get someone else hurt. Cops are terrified of looking bad in front of other cops. That's the thing that we fear, right? And so, like, I have to be able to just let that go. I have to have a place in my life where I can just allow myself to look like an idiot, because that's where I'm going to learn and grow as a person. When I was trying to, like, step into that and really, embody that, see what that's like. I remember this was maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. My daughter came to me, and her and her friends, She's 14. They were 13 at the time. They were doing one of these like TikTok dance things, and they wanted me to like do it with them. And like, without even thinking, the first words out of my mouth were, "No, I'm not doing that." Right. And she said, "Oh, please go and do it, please." And then I stopped and I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Like, I need to be able to lean into this. Like, who cares? Like, why not just experience something? Why not look like an idiot and try to dance? And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'll do it. And I had fun when I did it.
Is there any way I can get a chance? Can I get a copy of this video by any chance?
I'll have to find out if it still exists, Jay. I'm sure it's out there on the interweb somewhere, floating in the realm.
The TikTok
right? That's
space,
why,
in the cloud.
That's why you don't hit send. You're the second person that said we want video proof. but it's like there's some chaos that I have to open myself up to and not feel like I have to control everything. You know, like I have to put myself out there, willing to fail, willing to look bad, willing to not have to control everything, not have to fix everybody, Yeah,
the first responder thing is interesting about, not turning it off. I think the same thing, and the whole work class is, even if, you're like expected to be like, you can't ever turn it off, even if you want to be with your friends. Someone's like, oh, he's a cop, or like you're expected to act a certain way when you're with a group of people that like, oh, if something happens, you're going to be the person that steps up when you just want to be. You're not working that day. You're not doing anything. You don't need to be the tough guy or a tough girl. I think not only are you doing it within the organization, but society kind of looks at it the same way. I mean, you look at, I do with my son as nursing, right? I consider my son in the warrior class, right? With that is like, I'm always asking my son, when he first got in, asking all these questions about medical stuff. A lot of it was just to be an annoying dad, but like just ask him. Like when he comes home, he doesn't want to be a nurse.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when something happens? Everyone's like, oh, ask, oh, he's a nurse. Ask him. Like at that point in time, he's not a nurse. He's just like, a 24-year-old that's playing a video game. Does that make sense? If it's not life and death, why does he have to be thrust into it? But that class is always like, you're supposed to represent something when you're in uniform and also when you're out of uniform.
Yeah.
And I think that was hard to escape for me. It's like you're supposed to act a certain way, being an officer, like there's a certain way you're supposed to act off duty, right? Mm-hmm. On duty, off duty, you couldn't do certain things. You couldn't do, you couldn't get tattoos. You couldn't do all these other things. But it's the whole, not only the community, but I feel like the culture pushes you that way too. So you're kind of trapped on all sides, if that makes sense. And then sometimes your family thinks the same way too, because like something's going on. Like I laugh. I'm terrified to be home alone. I'm the biggest pussy that's alive when I'm in this house by myself. Like I'm terrified. I can't hear well. I am scared to death. I'm scared someone's going to come get. I am literally freaking out. I don't sleep. I got shut doors and lock them. You know what I mean? But that's me when I'm by myself. Like when everyone, when you're home, what are your family? So if somebody knocks on the door, someone's in your yard at 1:45 and at night your kid runs to you and gets you, right? Like I'm scared shitless, but now I gotta act. It's a weird thing, that persona. I feel like there was never, like, I agree with you, you could just never turn it off. Because it's the organization, it's society, it's your family. Everybody puts you into this. They identify you as something, and they have a understanding what that means. Like, what does it mean to be a police officer to some people?
Yeah, because it all goes back to expectations, right? And I don't have to, I don't have to be limited to anyone else's expectations, right? And again, I don't say this as a make wrong, but one of the things that worked for me was I had to get rid of all the thin blue line shit, the flags and the t-shirts and the bracelets and the coffee mugs. And like, I purged all that stuff because it's like, that stuff's ingrained in me enough, and what I need help is with turning it off when it's appropriate to turn it off, right? And so like that's not helping, right? So like, I just have to it's the difference between because I've kind of like when you're trying to develop a training on this, like how do I guide other people through this? Some people are going to be stuck in a story that this is who I am, right? But guess what? It's just a story, right? And too much of our identities are stories. And what has worked in my recovery and what works for me now in my life is I am my word, right? Like I am whatever I say. And so if I can say, yeah, like when I'm on duty and when it's needed for me to be aware of what's going on, hyper vigilant, being tactically sound, officer safety, like I can do all that. I can double down on it and do it really well. But then I can also say, I'm going to cross a threshold here and enter into this part of my life. And I can be someone different because I say so. And it gives me access to be anybody that I want to be, right? Because I'm not tied to that way of being. And, it's a difficult conversation to have. And like I said, that's part of the process of creating this training is having a way where it really breaks through people's denial, right? It breaks through, those sort of rigid structures that keep people where they are, keep their lives limited, because really anything's possible, right? I can create anything in my life. And I believe that I can create different things in different parts of my life as well. And because that's what's going to make me a complete responder is my ability to do that. And one of the key pieces to that is a ritual for crossing there, right? That's why the logo that I developed for Complete Responder, it looks like a labyrinth because a labyrinth, and Save Warrior uses a labyrinth as part of their program. A labyrinth is considered a symbolic ritual of transformation. It's a walking meditation. The difference between a labyrinth and a maze has an entrance and an exit. A labyrinth, you're coming out the same way that you go in. So you wind your way to the center and you transform in the center. You let go of what's not needed and you pick up what is needed in the center. And then you return back to where you started, right? And so it's like a ritual, right? That was the purpose of it. And, in modern society, especially our culture that we live in, rituals have kind of started to fall by the wayside. There's still a lot of things that are ritualistic. I mean, baking a cake and putting candles on it and singing to someone on their birthday, that's a ritual, right? We all do it. But rituals are intended to remind us of something, to highlight the importance of a distinction, right? And so that's why there has to be a ritual for crossing over, because it reminds me of that I'm going from this part of my life to this part of my life and what the difference is between the two. So, for example, and I've had this conversation with recruits when I've taught some officer wellness classes. If I was back on the street again, what I would have done is this. My ritual would have been, I would have taken off my vest and my gun belt before I walked into my house, because I'm symbolically taking off my armor and my gun belt before I enter into this part of my life. And when I'm symbolically doing that physical act, I'm also reminding myself, I can take off my emotional armor as well, because I don't have to be on high alert walking into this place, right? It's okay. And that's not a problem today, because like at the academy, I get to change before I leave for home. But I also like to play different music. Like I'll listen to more, sometimes like, hard rock or something that amps me up on the way to work, and then something a little more calm or relaxing or fun on the way home.
What's your on your way home music?
What's that?
What's your on your way home music?
Oh, it's like 80s music. It's like Duran Duran. And I mean, I am a child of the 80s.
All these, God, no, that's good advice. I mean, for someone that is starting off, that's a great trait to start, because that as much as it's symbolic, like you said, you're right. You add the emotional part of it, where you think about that, and you just you're coming home. Yes, I guess sometimes you're going home and the atmosphere isn't safe, but in most cases it's not. You can go in there and things are going to be okay. But I've heard that quite often. That's a good practice. I mean, same thing with the military. I think they do the same thing. As I like to go leave work with it. I didn't leave work in uniform if I didn't have to. I kept it at work. Where uniform work, I had it as like more to do it for just ease or whatever. But I was definitely doing that part of it, but I wasn't emotionally turning it off. You know what I mean? I could, I wasn't identifying myself as the uniform part of it, but I definitely never turned off the emotional. I'm still an officer, I'm still an Army guy, like all that kind of crap. So
I'm sure you've heard the analogy of the sheepdog, right? Like that was really popular. It still is kind of popular in law enforcement. The law enforcement are like the sheepdogs, right? And everyday citizens are the sheep, right? And the sheep don't like the sheepdog because he's always there, and and blah 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 blah. But they really like the sheepdog when the wolf comes, And the problem is sometimes that story, that analogy, gets used as a justification for being turned on all the time, being prepared for when the wolf comes, right? But I actually had like this thought not that long ago, and it's just like, you know what? A sheepdog will lay around and lick his balls sometimes, and just lay in the sun and not do anything, because really a dog knows how to be present in the moment, right? But he can snap to and be a warrior and go fight the wolf when he needs to, right? But it's like there's a certain level of, like I said, we can't overuse analogies to reinforce all or nothing thinking. That's going to ruin my personal life and ruin, like it's going to drive me crazy. And so like,
because a sheepdog can't be any different than a regular dog. I mean, looking at his chance to
fuck
off. If someone was petting it, it would be. But that is true. I mean, that's a great analogy. If you were looking at how dogs are as people, I mean, as animals, as animals, is they literally can be sitting on your lap, getting pet, relaxed, doing whatever, and then, but if they sense something is wrong, they do snap into a whole different.
A dog has no concern.
And then when they realize it's okay, then they are like, okay, I go back to like, are you gonna pet me or not? So that's definitely the part of the sheepdog analogy that's not portrayed. For reality, it's more just always on guard, always looking.
See, a story is useful for conveying wisdom, right? Because human beings love it. It's been the method for which we pass on and convey wisdoms. Storytelling, a great story, like a movie, for example, will teach us something, and we'll be able to put ourselves in that position and sort of like suspend reality, suspend our disbelief, and be able to learn something from that, right? Where a story is not useful is as my identity.
Yeah.
Right. When I just make who I am is nothing but this story, because then I'm locked into it. Right. I have no ability to change. And so, I think when we take the sheepdog analogy and we make it our identities. Like I'm a sheepdog, right? And I got to go get a t-shirt with a thin blue line on it. Now it's gone too far, right? Now it's because now it's not, it's just locking me more into a way of thinking that's, yeah, it's going to make me great over here, but it's going to severely limit my life and my ability to live and be present in a moment when, and like if I when I'm able to recover and have a more complete experience in my off time and feel the full range of emotions and not be stuck stuffing them down, that actually makes me a better officer because I'm more connected to people. I'm more able to empathize. I'm more able to, my tanks are filled back up. So I have energy to go out and do it. Yeah. And, that's more of the all or nothing thinking is when I feel like that's my whole identity, well, then I get wrapped into working all this overtime and special duty, and officers end up living in the uniform and wonder why joy seems to be gone from their life, or they feel like they're numb to most of it.
As you've been talking about this, I'm just looking at it a different way, but there's a part of that I think you're saying 100%. I agree with. The other thing I'd add into is when you're in sheepdog mode all the time, if you're the guy who's always, living on the edge or hyped up, and, that persona is also easy sometimes because it's what you are. And it also allows you to make excuses for why you're not doing other things. And it becomes like, for me, it was like, that's just the way it is. Like this is how I don't do this because of this. I don't do it. And there's a part of that becomes very easy until what you talked about, until you, whether it's 7 years, 10 years, 30 years, that you hit a burnout and realize, holy shit, all the things you missed. Because it is nerve-wracking to do a TikTok dance with your 14-year-old daughter. It is, humbling to say, like, let's go have a sprint with your kids that they're gonna outrun you. All those things, all these things that it's easy to just keep in that like tough guy, tough girl mode, and not reach out and try to find out who you really are. Because when you reach out and try to find out who you really are, that can shatter what your perception of who you really are. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of us, I think, in the warrior class, our perception is we're soldiers, we're police officers, we're firemen. But I used to ask the question a lot on here is, I ask people, what was the hardest part about getting out of the military? My thing I had as a story was my identity, because that's all I ever knew. That's all I ever looked at. And now that I look back, I'm like, fuck that. I mean, like I don't miss that. I miss parts of that, right? But I think the only thing I add in that there's a part that becomes very, very safe, and I think some people could ride it for 1 year. People can ride it for 30 years, but like you said, however far you ride it out, when you eventually look to your left and right, most of the time you're alone, and that's where it gets real ugly really fast. You know what I mean? And then you start making, like you said, making stories about I was just doing what the police department or the military expected of me, and story after story after story. So it's kind of an interesting dilemma to be in. But the conversation about it always, I think, helps to kind of look at it and digest it and how how you say it, because that's the thing, is that it felt comfortable for me to be that person for a long time, and then all of a sudden it didn't.
Nothing is more freeing than knowing that I can create myself as anyone that I want to be. Like I don't have to be locked into stereotypes or other people's expectations. Like it's really freeing. It allows me to explore other things, and not only a story about myself, but in beliefs. Like I don't have to be locked into stuff. I can open myself up to new experiences. I can try new things. Like I can that's part of life too. Like the excitement of it, like go somewhere you've never gone before, do something spontaneous,
Go to a
like,
musical.
what's that?
Go to a musical like someone we know. Not doing that. I have to make fun of Joe a little bit while he's over there. No, it's true. I mean, I think, but a lot of it takes it out of that, because it's when you have that persona, the tough guy, tough girl, the this and that, and this is my identity. I'm the sheepdog all the time. You never open yourself. You never really know who you are until you don't. Does that make sense? Like you never really know who you are until you don't. I mean, that's it's. Like I just look back at some of the things. I was like, man, I like you said before, I was hiding in plain sight. Like a lot of the stuff that was going on, I did not really want to be doing it, but I was too afraid to say I don't want to do this. I was scared. I was alone, unhappy, but it just wasn't. I didn't have the courage. It's always been there for me to do. I just didn't have the courage to speak my mind, and
you still know you had the courage to speak.
No, that's what I'm saying. Until a year ago, I realized I did have that power to say no, or this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm not going to do, and do it from a healthy way, because I was doing that for a long time where I was saying yes and no to things, and it was a very unhealthy yes and no. So it's crazy what a year will do. Stuck in the basement of a coffee shop with Jake. I'm kidding. I missed it last week. No, let's go back to the police academy and the job. You came on the force in 2005, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's 2024. You're in the training bureau. How much has the wellness changed from not what Jake Day's trying to do, but how much has the department changed since coming on? Almost 20 years ago.
I mean, it's night and day improvement from when I started. And, I'm not trying to make public statements about the state of my police department, but I think our department's doing a fantastic job with wellness now. We have the first ever public safety wellness center in the country. And it's a place where officers can go and get peer assistance, employee assistance program, chaplain service, and they do all kinds of other programs and stuff out of there. And so, yeah, I mean, it's come a long way. But my opinion about the profession is that it's not complete, right? A lot of it is reactionary. Right. And again, the profession is just limited by the resources that have available to it. Like in my personal opinion, to make law enforcement complete, one of the first things you'd have to have is an ability to manage the hypervigilance built into your duty day. Right. So that means you got to have time on duty to be able to work out. And not every police officer has that. And to get to a place where every police officer has that is going to take having more police officers, more money, right? More spending on public safety. And so, then it becomes a political and a societal issue, right? And it's going to take time for the profession to transform like that. And I'm hopeful that maybe it can get there. Right. Because I mean, like it's easy to see. Like I don't have the exact stats, be able to pull right off the top of my head, but it's somewhere in the ballpark of you're twice as likely to kill yourself than you are to die from a felonious assault in the line of duty, right? Because there's twice as many suicides as there are police officers being fatally assaulted in the line of duty, right? But yet we spend so much time in the academy preparing for the dangers
Mhm.
of those assaults that can happen, right? But that's not the biggest threat facing us, right? And so, like again, my department is light years ahead of most, but the profession isn't to a point yet where it's baked in, where the actual stress and hypervigilance that's caused by the job is then worked out by the job, right? And it's because society is, as a whole, is willing to accept a certain amount of loss or whatever, right? Like if you take a zero mistake industry, for example, like commercial airlines, like we cannot have a commercial airliner go down in America. There's thousands of flights every day for years on years on years on years. And there's rarely ever a commercial airliner goes down. Well, why is that? Because we have zero tolerance for that ever happening, to the point where pilots are restricted from flying too much.
Yeah.
Nobody's restricting police officers from working too much. Nobody. Because there's tolerance. Even though we say that there's a high standard and that we don't tolerate mistakes or whatever, there's still a tolerance, because we'd spend more to say, hey, you can't work more than 60 hours a week, at least as a starting point. But there's tons of officers that do. And some of them have to do it out of necessity, and it's like people are making that sacrifice. And, it's like a lot of that's taken for granted. Sometimes there's no choice. Sometimes there's departments where it's mandatory overtime, because of staffing issues, and we could go into it for days about the state of law enforcement over the last few years and how, people don't want to go into that profession after they see the way people have been treated. All it comes down to is that the profession isn't to a place yet where it's complete, in my assessment.
Yeah.
And I believe that I have a process that can help officers obtain that for themselves. And it comes through a conversation very similar to what occurs at Save a Word, the type that can transform your life and allow you to change your thinking, right? And so, that's, I think, what can, make an impact. And, I'm excited to create that and see it come together, because it'll be my own game, essentially. It'll be my own thing. Like, I don't have to ask anyone to approve my lesson plan or whatever. It's like, build it and they'll come. And if it's good, they'll keep coming.
Yeah.
And so we'll see. But I believe in myself, and I believe in the wisdom that I have to share. And I also am grateful for, the men that came back for me and shared that wisdom with me. Right. So I want to pass that on.
That is a good look on when we talked about I was happy to hear you say that it is night and day, but I think it's continues to have to improve. And my last guest was Dr. Brian was talking about the same thing. As to me, when I started the podcast and the things that I'm focused on now is when you talk about the airline industry, right? That's a good point. Like, when is it going to be zero acceptance that the warrior class is, killing themselves at a astronomical rate? And when are we going to start looking at, like within the military, which is where I come from, when are we going to, instead of buying new helicopters, when are we going to focus on, wellness and preparing soldiers and sailors and airmen to survive what's about to happen in their life, whether it's 4 years or 20 years. And it's something needs to change. But I feel like right now it's acceptable to a lot of people. A lot of people throw their arms up and they get upset by it. But to some people, it's just like, okay, it's part of the job.
And because, again, this is my personal my personal opinion, but I believe that the best way to improve community police relations is through officer wellness, because so many of the things that happen that damage community police relations is because that officer has been on a downward spiral in their personal life or their career, or both, right? And end up making poor decisions or are emotionally compromised, and nobody wants to source it back to the thing under the thing, right? Which is the physical and the psychological effects of performing this job over a long period of time without the proper recovery, right? It can be done. We just haven't always had the knowledge on what that looks like and how to do it. And even with the knowledge, now the knowledge isn't always, people have the knowledge on how to do stuff and they do the opposite all the time. Right. And again, because it goes into a way of thinking develops along the way that has to be taught how to pull yourself out of that way of thinking when it's appropriate. So yeah, it's difficult, but my main point was like the problems in law enforcement, improving community police relationship. Everybody wants to do that. To me, the answer is actually in officer wellness. That's the thing under the thing. Like you actually, and again, yeah, there's more costs for departments to increase the number of officers and to, because if I got an officer who's working out on duty, they're not on the street, right? So it's like you need more staff to cover the street while other officers are taking care of themselves, right? That's got a short-term cost, but in the long term, it pays for itself, because then you have a healthier workforce, less injuries, less healthcare premiums, less civil liability. But that's the name of the game, like anything else, is you got to convince people to invest in that, to invest in public safety. But so, yeah, I'm very passionate about officer wellness. I'm passionate about first responder wellness. And like I said, that's why, until the profession evolves, I think I have some wisdom to share on how officers can have a complete life and can be complete in this profession.
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to hearing more.
Yeah, I'm not telling you nothing, Jay.
Let's steal it. This is all recorded. We got this, didn't we, Joe? We got it all. Get this, write it down. Write down his business plan. I think we got it. Figured it out. But I could sit and talk about this for hours and hours, like we always do. But one final question. We're gonna switch it up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna give you the book question, but I feel like you're gonna go that way, so I'm gonna go with any person, living or dead, you could spend the day with. Who would it be and why? Jordan
Peterson, because he's the greatest intellectual mind of our time.
Ooh, that was a quick answer. Wow.
Yeah.
You already saw him live? You saw him live?
I did get to go see him when he came to Columbus. He's fantastic. I just was reading his book earlier today. So
quick answer.
Yeah, that one was easy.
So what was you going to talk about?
What's that?
What was you going to talk about? What one question would you have for him? I mean, you kind of have a fanboy a little bit of it. I mean, I can't lie.
Well, yeah. I mean, I would just want to get it. Yeah. I'd want to have a conversation just like we're having.
Yeah.
Like, because I mean, he has his podcast. Like, I'd love to bounce some of my ideas off of him, because then I'd get to really put them to the test, see how my philosophy and my logic is stacking up.
What's the old school Joe? They'd be like, Jake, we're all dumber to listen to what you just said. May God have mercy on our souls.
Yeah.
You get 0 points, but hopefully, I know he would say that too, but that'd be a good person to spend the day with. I think I should have predicted that you'd say that. But
yeah, I mean, I could just, you start talking about authors and Yeah, I'd love to pick Mark Manson's brain too.
Some good ones, good choices. A lot of people to pick brands.
I'd love to talk with Joe Rogan too.
Just not in the locker room like that one guy lately. It would be interesting to see all those people to talk to when you don't, because we only hear them from the, behind the mic or what the part they want you to see, right? Like you talked about, it would be fun to have a conversation with them, just off the camera, no one looking, and really just seeing who they are as people as well would be really intriguing.
Anyone that does long form content, I feel like you get a better glimpse of that than anyone who's superficial, where you're just getting 15-minute hot takes and social media clips and news stories. So I think that's the beauty of long form content, is it just allows people to bounce ideas off each other and to work that out in conversation and dialogue, which is what is sorely missing in our culture sometimes.
I agree.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to talk about? It's your show. It's your time. It's your hour. You're the man of the hour. We're 2 hours.
I definitely would just want to say that I would, first, I'd be remiss if I didn't give a lot of credit to my wife, Jessie, for being there and supporting me through, my recovery journey. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't, thank the men that came before me and that came back for me and showed me a way. I don't say that it's the way, but it's a way, and my life has become wonderful ever since. So
the dogs love that shout out.
Yeah.
I don't see my wife's on, I think. They always come on cue at the worst times. I figure out how to block them out. Just get rid of them. They're going. But no, Jake, I do want to, on behalf of Pours with Patriots, thanks for coming on and sharing your story. Thanks for finally saying yes. I don't think I've heard.
I can only stand so much of the whining, Che.
No, but the same thing like you just said. And it's a privilege to be a year out of the container, a year. To thank you for coming back for me, and thank you for helping me along the way the past year. Really, really, like you just said, to show me a way, a healthy way, a better way than I can do it, and just hope I continue to travel with you, continue the journey, and also show other men the a way. I'm kidding. A way of doing it. So have another we'll end another good quote for you at the end, I think, hopefully.
Probably one that you didn't research either.
I mean, I'd have time. I'm literally like Joe's here. We'll talk off camera a little more about it, but I was tempted to I was on your Facebook and there was pictures of you as a heavier police officer, and I was very tempted to put one of those on. And I thought, you know what?
That's just what happened, man. I don't got a story about it anymore.
The old Shay would have put that up, and it would, it wouldn't go.
Listen, I want the context, baby. You don't bring a quote without the context.
I mean, that's true.
It's okay. Give me your quote.
We can talk more about that. Well, the quote's after. Don't put the pressure on me.
Big finish.
Now, before we get to the quote, we're going to get to the part of the evening where we honor a patriot who took their life tonight. We're going to honor U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Connor R. McDonnell, 26 years old. Connor was born on May 17th, 1995 in Littleton, Colorado. Connor took his life on September 1st, 2021. He graduated from Highlands Ranch High School in 2013. After graduating in 2013, Connor enlisted in the United States Army as an infantryman and was assigned to Joint Base Lewis McChord, Washington. Connor served in several campaigns across Southeast Asia and Afghanistan. Connor received numerous awards, including the Army Commendation Medal, and left active duty in 2020. Connor was known for his humor. He had an incredible trait to keep the mood light during difficult times. He was regarded as a gentle and respected leader. He loved many outdoor activities, including camping, hiking, kayaking, and fishing with family and friends. He loved his family and never missed an opportunity to spend time with them. After leaving the service, Connor worked in home remodeling and particularly enjoyed welding and carpentry. Connor is survived by his beloved dog, Lily, father and stepmother, David and Mary Ann, mother, Jonelle, 4 siblings Kyle, Caitlin, Chase, and Emerson, step-siblings William and Ryan, and numerous other relatives and friends. And as always, if you or someone you know is considering suicide, please contact the Veterans Crisis Hotline at 988 or at 1-800-273-8255. Or you can now dial 988 or press 1 or text 838-255, or you can chat online at veterancrisisline.net/chat. So a couple other announcements before to the quote. Some pretty good news here coming up for Reports with Patriots. We have partnered with a local charity, Spike the Stigma, Mend the Minds. We just received word last night that we were one of the grant winners, and so was the organization we just talked about, Save a Warrior. So the event that we go to every summer this year raised $30,300. Really great to receive that grant. Thank you to Spike the Stigma and the Mind. We love you, ladies. It's always awesome to spend time with you, and also to be recognized with what we're doing. So guests coming up. I think we're done with Air Force people. I'm not sure for a little while.
Don't bring them in.
Get the flag down. Am I safe? Well, yes, we put that.
When are you going to have someone from the Space Force on? That's what I want
we
to know.
have not yet. I mean, there's a flag. If anybody knows anybody in Space Force, let me know. We got to get them in there. They'll
be the first.
It. Our guy behind the camera is like flipping off slides faster. Can you go back that one there, Nate? We are booked all the way through the years. We'll put out a post here in Reports with Patriots. We are booking soon here for the next year, season 3 of Reports with Patriots. But we would love to get like you said, get a Space Force person. It would be great.
Yeah.
Someday we will get it. So I'm gonna end it with a quote. An unresearched quote. I think I know who these people are. These ones also. What's Joe got there now? Oh, that's right. We do. Joe wants me to talk about it. It's coming up. We will be again at the Fraternal Order Police celebrating the Army-Navy game. Hopefully another victory by Army. If not, it'll just feel like it was for many, many years. So, but I predict a good Army team. We'll be out there that'll be our second year supporting that. We're excited to work along the Fraternal Order Police as well. So this one, I think we know the quote. This is from Maya Angelou.
Oh.
Have you heard of her? It says, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you do, but people will never forget how much you made them feel. Look at that.
That's true.
I get a tear after that. Those are both quotes to you. My subliminal messages to you. So again, Jake, thank you for coming on for episode 62. More importantly, thank you for everything you've done over the past year. Thank you for coming back for me.
You're welcome. You're worth it.
I appreciate that. So are you. You're worth it. I love that one. So we'll see everybody in a couple weeks. Episode 63. The Army flag is going back up. Thank you for everybody that tuned in live and everyone that is listening later. We will talk to you in a couple weeks. Thanks.
Hey, thank you.